Hi guys, welcome to season 5 of Abuse Recovery Success. You're here for the first few episodes of this season, and part of what I wanted to do in this season is really involve some inspiring people, and I couldn't be more excited than to have our guest that we have today. Hayden is a guru of marketing, an influencer on social media, and I was just telling her earlier, I've kind of been fangirling her. So I'm obsessed. I love all that she stands for, just how comfortable she is in her own skin. And I hope you guys know, as my bright lights out there, that here at Abuse Recovery Success, we want to empower others. We want to shatter any stigmas associated with trauma and addiction, but also to really celebrate success. And in my eyes, Hayden is a picture of that. So Hayden, without further ado, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, I still get so excited when I get to meet people who have been following me for so long because they really have seen the process. And, I'm sure you can relate to this, but anytime that you go through having like traumatic experiences and then overcoming them, that journey is very vulnerable when you share it with people.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where you're at these low points, and I just never realized how much it brings people together to share those things. And I remember when I first started to put that stuff out there too, and I didn't know how it was going to be received. I didn't know if people would pity me or feel bad for me, which was never my point.
Sure.
But being able to connect with people, especially people like you, who have followed me this entire time and gotten to see that, it's so nice to be here now and be able to go thank you so much for participating with me. So I know we're kind of here to talk about this whole story that got me to this point today.
Yeah.
And it has been a journey. So I always start my timeline right around my divorce. My divorce was about 5 years ago now. And it was a breaking point for me. And it kind of started this whole tumultuous time in my life because when it rains, it pours, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the divorce was the starting point. I, had been in this marriage or this partnership for about 9 years. He was not a partner. And I try not to be negative now about my co-parent as much as I possibly can, but he just wasn't right for me. He had boxed me in. He had been insecure. He had been jealous. And I was a mere, ghost of who I could actually be today. And looking back on that, trying to not create resentment around that is a really challenging thing because you look at how much life you lose when you're with a bad partner, and you never realize just how much of a disservice they did until you come out of it and heal and become who you were meant to be. And just kind of re-envisioning, you're going to see me be really reactive this whole time I tell this story because I swear I wear my emotions on my face. But it took a lot of healing just from the divorce side of things, of how much life I couldn't recover. You know what I mean? There's so many things when you go through a bad relationship or someone holds you back that when you do come out of it, although you've learned all these wonderful lessons you'll take with you, you don't get that time back. And so, also being not a good partner, talking about I gave him my credit so that we could run things. So he ran my credit into the ground. I gave him my business. I gave him every single penny we had in our bank account. I said, please just leave. I need to start over. I need to start fresh. And I have actual pictures that I always love to compare now of my house, how he left it, bed on the floor, nothing in it, totally empty. I couldn't afford it. And I tell people all the time, I was broke. And I had given him a car. There's a car in my name. I had completely maxed out my credit. I was at the lowest of the low. So I went out, I got a job. I started working to make ends meet. This person was a dear friend of mine, someone I had worked with previously during my marriage. And I went back to him and was like, I need this now. And I'll do a great job for you. A couple of months into that, he and my assistant die in a plane crash. I lose that position and my friend who had offered me this position. And then the people internally who I had thought I could trust, they all betrayed me. They canceled my son's insurance. I got, pushed out. I actually believe that I was in his will because he was such a dear friend of mine. But even just processing at the time, like going through a divorce, I have no money. I've, got my boss now who was supposed to be a lifeline for me, and a friend, and all of this, dying in a plane crash. My assistant is in my place, headed to this event. She dies at a very young age, newly married in her 20s. And if we think that it won't get worse, it does, because for the first time in my entire life, I am trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to come back from this. I'm in this pit. I have no options. I've got this child. This man has left me in this huge pit of debt. I have nothing. And I'm like, how do you come back? What do you do? So, of course, I reached out to one of my only lifelines, my parents. I went, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, two separate entities. I said, never asked for help. And I'm embarrassed at this age that I'm going to ask, but I need it. Mm-hmm. I need the help. Mm-hmm. And my mom said no. She just bailed. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, we're talking about a couple $100 so I could move. I needed the help, and I needed to pack this house that I was living in as a unit that I couldn't afford on my one-person salary, that to the job that I just lost in a plane crash, crazy scenario, like everything that could go wrong did, very Murphy's Law. And in these moments, and I know that this is metaphorical for everything for everyone, you know what I mean? Everybody has a traumatic moment. Everybody has a turning point. Everybody has something where you either can lay there and suffer and succumb to all of the things that are happening to you, or you can rise from the ashes like a phoenix. And so I let myself feel sorry for myself for a couple days, and then I went, I don't have the option to do this anymore. So I made the decision to get back to fucking work.
I love it.
And so I went out and I was like, I'm going to do this. This is not going to define me. So what do I have to do? And I got scrappy. And I started to learn things about myself that I didn't allow myself to be before. Because the reason I had gotten to that place, as much as it was the fault of other people and everyone had failed me that I had put my trust in, I had to take some responsibility that I gave them the power to do these things to me. And so once I had kind of taken that ownership and accepted that I was going to have to forgive people that didn't necessarily ever give me an apology, just for my own sanity, things started to look up. So I went out, I found a great job. I busted my ass. I really, really did. I got in with a very large cosmetics company, and I promised them the world because I knew I could do it because I was hungry enough. And sure enough, I really delivered. I delivered. I started making money. I paid off all my debt. I started a side hustle, which was my influencer stuff. I said, I am going to use every waking hour that I have to make money. I'm going to come back from this, and I'm going to define who I am, and I'm going to share this story because I know there are other people just like me who are going through this, and I don't want them to feel stuck. And so I did. I worked a full, we're talking a marketing CMO level position, salaried, busting butt, flying all over the place, really trying to hustle and prove to these people that I was worth the money that they were going to spend on me. And then in my evenings and every single spare second that I had, I was doing pictures, Instagram stuff, connecting with people, and I built this following and I monetized it. So I was making money over here and making money here, and I was chucking it all onto my debt and taking care of my son, and I was really in every single place that I could be. I will preface, don't burn out. Yeah. Self-care is important, and I still tried to interject that stuff, but I put myself in the room with some of the most famous people in the world, and it was something that I was able to leverage because they saw that true genuity in me where I wasn't trying to get anything from them. I really just wanted to be there, and I wanted an opportunity. I wasn't looking for a handout. I was looking for a chance. And so we're talking put the cosmetics, company in the room with Kim Kardashian. And then I was working with some of the largest influencers like the Nikita Dragons and the Jeffree Stars, and anywhere that I could be with all of the big people and be respected and seen as an equal. And I put myself there in 2.5 years. No more debt, making money, had the influential stuff, was in all the right rooms, and then I started my own company. And that took off. 6 figures, first year, no problem. Kept growing. Started a second company. And since then, it's only been upward trajectory because I don't make excuses for myself. And I have stopped letting people, when they show me their red flags, I've stopped letting them show them to me and have me deny them. Yeah. And so I think that once I realized that I could do it myself after all of that horrible trauma and just, even to this day, I don't speak to my mother. I have never spoken to a lot of the people who completely screwed me over in those times of need, and they have reached out for jobs. They've reached out to reconnect. It's so funny how all that stuff comes full circle. Those people always end up showing back up. And it's so nice to be able to be here and thank people for hurting us. You know what I mean? Like, thank you for hurting me. I didn't realize that I actually needed that so I could become who I was meant to be. Very caterpillar cocoon to butterfly, So
I love that chrysalis.
Yeah.
It's a great transformation. I guess, Hayden, what I'm curious about, and, obviously it's whatever you're comfortable sharing with us, but I want to talk more about maybe the toxic dynamic of the marriage. Like you said, I know you don't want to go around bashing anyone, but hear a little bit. Because we have listeners that are finding themselves in that position right now. And at the end of the day, they might not know the red flags, or they might be questioning or doubting themselves. Yes. So I think before we get to hearing maybe how you started to know you had to escape that, do you think that any of your childhood or experiences growing up had a part to play in setting you up to be in maybe that type of a relationship later?
100%. This is how I know that you're very intellectual, because they always do. Yeah. Anytime that we start unpacking our trauma after we experience it, it always comes back to that foundational childhood stuff. Mm-hmm. And since you can kind of see full circle in my story that my mom then later goes on to abandon me in a time of need, you can recognize why I would have chosen a partner who could potentially basically reflect that trauma back to me. So absolutely, my upbringing, my mother really raised me in more of like an anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant kind of psychological style. She ran a very tight ship. She was a kept woman. My stepfather ran the show. I was very sheltered. The expectations were grueling. I didn't have normal things. Like we didn't have television. I just grew up in a very unusual environment. And I'm still to this day, when people play me music that is from like my childhood time, they feel like I'm an alien because it's like it wasn't part of my life. Yeah. But she was also incredibly abusive. So could never be pleased. Absolutely hit me. I mean, name calling, screaming. I was afraid of her. I mean, even to this day, it has taken me so much time and healing and talking through it and really having to psychoanalyze where that fear was built from. But I was horrified. And she made me feel small. And because I watched her be the same thing towards my stepfather, who was also incredibly verbally abusive, a scary man. He was like the kind of man who, because he was the breadwinner, he wanted everyone to run in like the Brady Bunch to greet him after work. Like so total narcissist, like just absolutely awful. And they are the kind of people too who never apologize for anything. They're always right. They have these very closed-minded views, very elitist, and treated me different. I was the different child. My mother's children, and again, I came from a very wealthy family. They were very well off. I got a scholarship to the same school that they were paying private for all three of the other children. And they still made me go to public school. So I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning and bus while they drove and paid for the other three. They were his children, though. I was not. And she allowed this. I have stories from like Christmases where we'd go visit his family, and they would one year they gave me talcum powder for Christmas, and all of my other siblings opened these beautiful gifts. And I remember asking my mom, why do they treat me that way? And I remember her spanking me or yelling at me for questioning, even though I knew she was upset about it too. They completely ostracized us. We were isolated from the family. They didn't like me. They openly told me as a child. And imagine the trauma attached to telling a child we don't like you. You're not a part of our family. You're not accepted. And then many Christmases I got nothing. And as a child, that dynamic, and I know it's so weird to think about, because as an adult, we're whatever, they didn't get you a gift. But as a child, the idea of Christmas, crazy. And it's funny too when you ask questions how it always comes back to certain foundational moments. But I remember being in those instances where everyone was treated better or different, and my mom never protected me from that. And then she also made me feel ashamed for asking. So yes, foundational, 100%. And then, as I was groomed by that stuff then defines how you love, how you perceive you should be loved. We accept the love we think we deserve, right? And so I think that governed a lot of who I became. Very rebellious. A lot of my, like, what people would consider like promiscuity, or like my very like outrageous or outlandish kind of overt sexuality, and like some of the things I showcased started at a very young age, because I think I knew from an intellectual perspective that what was happening was wrong, but I didn't know how to break free of it. So this is how it manifested.
Yeah.
And so I found a partner that was like 10 years my senior, and at the time when I met him, he seemed like the prize, you know? And I think in some ways I picked someone who, it's not so much like my mother, but he was like my mother in some ways, in the ways that were like very controlling and name calling and possessive and expectations, but he was also completely opposite in the sense that it almost would get under her skin. Like, she wanted me to marry, you know, a doctor, a lawyer. Like, she was one of those women. My ex-husband is a glass tech. He installs automotive glass and still does to this day. And so I think that there was like a combination of manifesting that trauma in another person, and you know, the fact that he was older than me by 10 years, and he had a child from a previous marriage. I was 18 and going into college. Like, my mom hated everything about it. And I think for some reason that made me work harder at it. But then a lot of the things that I dealt with my mother came present, you know, inside of the relationship. And it is funny because, I mean, I feel like anytime that you get away from this stuff, we can always look back and go, oh, man.
Yeah.
I wish I could have seen from above now. You know what I mean? And you unpack these things. And so the other question that you kind of just, you know, since we're parlaying into that, was, you know, recognizing those signs. So early on in my relationship with Alan, because I had never really experienced other relationships other than, again, those foundational ones with our parents or the people we love, I feel like as I started to get into the relationship, I didn't even see the red flags because they weren't red flags in my parental life. My mom's been beating the crap out of me forever. My mom's been calling me names forever. How is it any different than if my partner is scaring me to, you know, really scaring me out of my wits? I mean, the man would scream. He would call me he would name calling, gaslighting galore too. And if I could tell anything to the listeners, learn the term gaslighting and call people out for it, because they will make you feel crazy. What are you saying? I never did that. You're crazy. You're too sensitive. And you're like, I'm too sensitive because you just called me a like, or, you know, when they're treating you like you're the crazy one for questioning something or for wanting something or for anything that is, you know, outside of what their expectations are from you. And it's so funny now because finally, after healing and trauma and all this stuff, I'm in a healthy relationship. And sometimes it's so funny to be with another person who then reciprocates that health after they've been in trauma, because you both do things and you're like, wow, we're not fighting about that. Wow, you're not going to call me a name. Wow, this seemed really easy. And you're like, it feels like that. And they get to that place where they're like, man, this is so easy. And for 9 years, 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, whatever it was, I tolerated less than this. And we really sometimes only have ourselves to blame because we can control it.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to, you know, the little Hayden at Christmas and really acknowledge that. And Hayden, you know, you're a mom and I'm a mom too. And, you know, so I empathize so much with that. And I can just imagine my 8-year-old is one of my favorite people, where he's my little buddy. And, you know, he would be devastated if that happened. Oh, yeah. And I would never be okay with that. We'd be storming out and they'd get some choice words from me. That's what, you know, a healthy parental relationship looks like, with someone, you know, there to protect you. And I think, you know, I relate so much to a lot of what you said, especially in regards to how those early childhood relationships do really influence what we accept. And it's so crazy because for me, I got sober 3 years ago, and part of that journey in getting sober was learning how to love myself. And I hated myself for so many years. And it was so easy to hate because I identified so much with that shame from all of my childhood. And I recently got out of a relationship about 5-6 months ago. And that was a relationship that I too don't want to talk negatively about, but it had all of that, the toxic, the gaslighting, the things. And for so long, they were acceptable to me until I started loving myself. And it's crazy to hear you talk about the relationship, which I have also seen on social media. But and so we want to hear more about that too. But yeah, I'm looking forward to one day having a healthy relationship and utilizing all the things that I've learned over the years. I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so you're young, you get into this marriage and, you're stuck and you're starting to realize things. You like you said, you had no reference point to know those red flags early on. So now let's fast forward to kind of towards the end. How did you come to that breaking point of saying enough is enough? And for the listeners out there, I'm getting goosebumps that are, in that moment and debating right now what they're going to do. Like, what would you put into them or give them as advice, or kind of walk us through that?
So it's funny because I actually get this a lot. My following, and I spend a lot of time either talking people off the ledge or giving people advice in this scenario, because people do watch you go through it and they see you come out on top, which is why I showed the dark moments. I went, here's my empty closet, here's my bed on the floor. Like, I am not going to fake the glam here. And I'm not going to lie about being broke and showing that you can come back and become very affluent afterwards. I feel like anytime that I've had listeners or people who follow me reach out, everyone's always looking for like, well, what are those signs? And I'm like, it's different for everyone. I'm like, as much as I can tell you mine, and I plan to go through those, I want everyone to know that just because it's not like a checklist, like don't start going, oh, well, he doesn't do that, or oh, no, it's specific to you. You know what red flags are. If you find yourself making excuses for your partner, or you can't openly and honestly talk about something they did or are doing to you to someone else without feeling like you have to protect what actually happened, that's how you know a red flag. Have you ever been in those situations where you're like, you experience something and then when you go to tell your friend, you feel like you need to either water it down or dilute it because you know how bad it is. Anytime you feel shame about something that's going on, it's not good for you. Nothing in your life should make you feel ashamed. We need to be able to heal those things, work through those things. And until we actually accept those pieces of ourselves, our shame, and we don't turn it into shame, we turn it into like what it is that defined us, who we are, and make peace with it, we can't actually find the right people, because we'll continue to just reflect our trauma and then find that in return. And that's really the thing that I realized for a very long time before I found this healthy relationship, but it took a very long journey, is anytime that I picked partners, when I look back on what they were reflecting something I still needed to heal in myself. And that's why they never felt healthy. And a real healthy relationship, it will feel good all of the time. Even in some of those moments where you're going to have, fights or arguments, they dissipate. Even like, I will tell you right now, even my partner now, our fights are like the healthiest thing I've ever experienced. Like, they don't even really last long, and it's important to have. But so going back to, stuff with my ex, I would say we were together for 9 years. I would say about 3 years prior, and we're talking like, not the whole time is terrible, but it starts where there are red flags that are evenly placed throughout. You might have 6 months of happy time, and then you'll have a knockdown, drag-out fight where he claims that you punched yourself in the face. Or, you're a couple more months in and you have a baby, and the baby's screaming in the back, and it's your birthday, but because you won't quiet him down, he starts punching the ceiling and calling you a because you're too concerned with taking birthday calls. I mean, and these are just little moments for me where, and he to this day still justifies them. He's like, well, you were being a cunt in that moment. And I'm like, good luck to your new wife. You guys have fun. Yeah. So, but it is just so funny to think back.
Seems like it was his favorite word.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the one that was so hard for me because like that one, even though we can totally reclaim it, I could be like, I'm a powerful Yeah. I just think of the fact that it's meant to be so biting. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, anytime that people say words, like, words are words. Yeah. Like, that was always his argument. They're just words. They don't mean anything. I'm like, you're right. They are just words. They don't mean anything. But your intention of why you said it, like, you weren't using it in a positive way. You weren't like, man, it's such a great one. You were trying to degrade me. And you're also trying to, like, from a very like chauvinist
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
like demean me as a
Yeah,
woman. Like
yeah.
you are just a woman. You are only this.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be hurtful. And it always comes from a place too, like men who name call, men who beat women, they're insecure. They have their own healing to do. And the second we stop taking it personally, we shouldn't actually have to deal with it. First of all, let me just say,
Yeah.
don't deal with it. But
Yeah.
also, it's not really about you. They make it about you, but it's their own fears they're reflecting, their own self-loathing. I mean, my significant other at the time, he was so afraid of watching me blossom. He wanted to keep me small because he knew if I blossomed, I would leave. And he doesn't really want to accept this, but to this day, when we split, he left me in this pit of despair, debt, all this stuff. I had given him a business to run. It did pretty well for a while, and he is broke again. I am paying for everything. And meanwhile, here I am up here. You know, I've got 2 businesses now, no debt that I got saddled with from him. After giving him, you know, my credit, I have no alimony, child support. I got nothing from that relationship except for some debt. I always said, like, I want a t-shirt that says, I married a man for 9 years and all I got was some debt, because that's literally how I feel. And I do everything for my son, and I'm the better parent. I do all the homework, all the meetings. That man has not been to a doctor, dental, eye doctor appointment in his life. I don't even think he knows where he goes. And so it's crazy to look at all of this and then know that at the time, leaving and feeling that from other people where they want to make you ashamed of it. They're like, oh, she just wants to go out and sleep with other people. Oh, she wants to go out and just be a this, and she's this and she's this. And I'm like, I just wanted to leave for myself and my sanity. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I mean, I look back on this stuff though, and I think it because I remember the hatred. And, you know, I have friends going through divorce and stuff now, and they're like, how do you make yourself like get through this? And I was like, it was a tough time. I'm like, this sleeve of tattoos came as me trying to get through it. I was like, every time I'd be somewhere, like at a soccer game or whatever, and watching his family come with and belittle me, like, oh, you're just the harlot who you just wanted to go out there and have sex with other people. And I'm like, I really just wanted to not have 3 holes punched into my wall every time that we argued about what color the dishes were, because it's like we would argue about the dumbest things. And it always came when he started to feel like I was getting bigger. And I remember he'd feel like I didn't understand him, so he'd punch a hole in the wall. Like my dad came at one point, this is around the turning point of when I was getting ready to kind of get to the divorce. Because it is a process. I don't never tell anyone that you're going to listen to this and go, you know what, divorce tomorrow. Like it takes a couple years. When you've been married to someone, like you're grooming yourself for that leaving process and preparing, because it's not super easy always. And unless you're in an incredibly abusive relationship, leave today and figure it out later. I'm telling you, you can. But my dad came to visit at a time, and he was like, why do you have all these pictures in weird spots on the walls? Like there's a picture down here, there's a picture up here. And I moved them all, and there's hole punched right through the wall. And he was like, who's doing this? I was like, well, not me. I can't reach up there. And so he was just kind of like, I don't know what to say. He's like, are you safe? And I'm like, I think so. But he's like, this isn't okay. It was one of the first times, and my dad's always never tried to meddle in that stuff. But when you start to like look at all of the things that you had been trying to cover up with the pictures, that metaphorical covering the hole in the wall with a picture, I talk about it all the time in life now. Like, am I doing this? Like, am I covering this up with a picture? I even use that scenario because it so much was that. And like when I had pulled all the pictures away and kind of looked at what was going on, I'm like, my house is full of holes. Physically and metaphorically.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And honestly, I think that's something that we can all take real quick. I have to interject from this because I'll probably use it now. I'll be like, are we covering up the holes? And it's so profound because I think that is what really kind of sets in when you really start to realize real quickly. I had this point where I actually started recording my ex. And, you know, it was actually my teenage son's idea. He said, Mom, you need to start recording him. And so I did. And there'd be these points where he would actually say like horrible things. And then 5-10 minutes later in the conversation, I'd say, why did you say this? And he'd say, no, I didn't. And it was like, I sat there for 3 days listening to these recordings and I just had my mind blown. Like, oh my God, I'm not crazy and this is happening. And so I totally relate to a lot of that. But I think that's a great way for us to look at things like, what are you hiding? What are you masking? And how you really tied it into how in explaining things to friends, you were changing, discontorting stories just to make it sound better. And I think that's a good thing for the listeners. So when you told him, was he like volatile? Like, how did you go about it?
So it's funny that you mentioned the recordings. I still have mine. Sometimes I like to go back and listen to them and just go, what a good choice. And then sometimes I think about that Hayden in that moment, how I could look back and tell her, like, girl, why are you even bothering to record this man? Anybody who would treat you like this isn't worth it. But also, the men who always do that kind of treating, it's because they know they don't have enough to offer. And instead of rising to the occasion to actually offer things where they don't feel threatened by the potential of the outside world, they would rather just belittle you into thinking that you're the worthless one. And I mean, I relate to that very much. And it's hard because I feel like there's so many times when we're in those moments that we're recording to protect ourselves or we're recording to make ourselves not feel crazy. And we start to feel like our lives are a requirement, not an option, And I don't know. I feel like every time I reflect back into that part of my life, it almost doesn't feel like it was my life anymore. Like I look back on it like it's this other world, like I'm looking down on it. And that person who was in there, like she doesn't even really exist anymore. She lives somewhere in me, but she's completely something else.
Yeah. But it's inspiring to the rest of us because it is like, when you're in that moment and you're kind of like, what do I do? How do I get out of it? How can I better my life? And you see someone else that's doing it. And like you said, on the other side, like my tattoo on this arm is hello from the other side. And that's when I started my journey into recovery. And what it represents for me is like when I came out of the other side of the haze and the mess and the darkness of my, disease, my addiction, I got to experience something else. And so I think watching you, it was able to kind of see like, hey, here's a woman on the other side of some really horrible things. And, she's living her best life. So speaking of best life, why don't you tell us a little bit about now? Like
about my honey.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to this is like the funny thing because I'm so talkative and so wordy, and trying to quantify who this person is so challenging for me because he is everything. And it's not really common for me to be at a loss for words for how I can describe someone. But this man is this feeling for me, and it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. Darian is remarkable. I don't even know how I got so lucky to find him. You know what? Hold on. We're not going to talk like that. I know how lucky I am because I did the work that I needed to. Absolutely. I actually healed the things that I needed to heal in myself. I would have missed out on Darian in previous years. And I know it. I know I would have overlooked him because I was in a toxic place. I hadn't done my healing, and I wouldn't even really realized what my partner had to offer because I wouldn't have been looking for it. I would have been looking for people who had trauma to reflect. And frankly, that is not to say that Darian is not also a person who has healed from trauma. Darian has had a tough life. Parents died, both of them, cancer before the age of 21. The man has been raising himself his whole life. Worked his butt off. I have the utmost respect for what he's built. He just recently came out of another marriage. He was with a partner for 13 years. He has beautiful children that I love, love, love. They're my bonus babies. But he has his own trauma and story when it comes to being in a relationship that was painful. Sure. And I think that we had the right kind of healing before we met one another. And the things that he was missing that he so desperately craved, I'm able to provide, and vice versa.
That's awesome.
And we can also relate because, I have no mother and she abandoned me and I have all this trauma here. And he comes from, family that screwed him over or not good relationships with some of the siblings, and then, parents who passed away, and then having almost forcing himself into a life that wasn't really who he is because he felt like he had to simulate something he lost. And
Sure.
it always comes back to that foundation, right? Like we all have these foundational things that we don't work through because we don't know to, and then they manifest in our lives later. So when we met, so Darian is like 13 years my senior, and he's gorgeous though. The man is so timeless. Like if you saw us together, you'd be like, he's 13 years older than you. And I'd be like, no, I don't. There's not enough Botox in the world to make me look like this man. He's just gorgeous, and he's this incredible father, and he's always on the ball with everything. And he's like my saving grace. Like the man does the dishes and the laundry, and he just does everything all the time. I mean, even just coming here, he dropped me off. Like he's just so on the ball, and then also successful and this great parent and partner and loving, and we communicate through everything, and I feel understood. And he is the first partner I've had that I have no secrets from. I have told this man my shame, my pain. I have told him things that I had a hard time talking about with myself.
Yeah.
And let him love me through it. Let him look at me and see me and know me. And it was the first time I really took a risk in doing so, but it was the right one, because I actually got to a point where I went, if I'm actually going to do life with someone the right way and not just the way that I thought it was supposed to be done before, I was going to have to show people these things about myself, because I'm a tough pill to swallow. You know, I've got a lot of access in the world. There's all sorts of people that are in my messages. I am constantly out there. I put a lot of myself out there. It is hard to pick a partner that wants to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I've had people totally intimidated by it before. It's driven people completely crazy. You know, it's been hard for people to be my partner. I actually got to a point where I was like, hey, if I end up alone, I can afford it. So I was perfectly fine with it. So, but this man came, and anybody who knew me, they were like, you're engaged? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, I thought you weren't going to get married again. And I was like, I wasn't going to get married again unless I met this man that I have now. Otherwise, I had no intention.
Yeah.
Like, if this man left me today, I would never get married. And it was because I just genuinely didn't think I could spend a lifetime with anybody. Like, I didn't think that there would be anybody who I could really do life with. Like, this man and I do life together. We do the hard shit. We parent 4 children. We did 4 children at home during COVID. Like, this man is a miracle.
Yeah.
And you know, he still gives me a lot of autonomy, though. I have my businesses and my life, and he doesn't intervene, and he's very good about not overstepping because he knows how, like, feministic I am. So unless I ask for, you know, help or support or whatever, he lets me do things myself. He knows. He's like, she's got it. He's proud of me. But he also interjects where it's needed, and knowing for the first time in my life that I actually have someone that I can genuinely lean on and trust, it is an unrivaled feeling. Like, I've never, ever felt anything like this. And that lack of feeling like I have to hide any piece of myself. Like, I can go tell this man terrible things about myself. I could be like, I have these deep, dark thoughts or whatever it is, and he'll hear them and receive them, and we will pick a pathway forward together. And I've given him the same. And I think he's felt for a very long time like he wasn't being loved how he needed to be loved, and I know that I love him in that way. I fiercely love this man, and like, my best friend.
I love that. You know, Hayden, I'm a hopeless romantic. So I love that story. And listeners, this is for you guys. Like, there's always love out there. And, you know, this show, we've got both men and women listening. And all of what we talk about here can be really reversed in any way. You know, we all experience toxic relationships. A lot of us have gone through them. And, you know, like Hayden mentioned, you know, he's gone through some issues too.
Yeah.
So what I guess I want to say next is tell us a little bit about, you know, you're balancing all these things, being a mom, you know, doing all the businesses. How does that work? How do you stay sane? How do you stay grounded, balance this relationship? What are some practices you utilize to keep yourself centered?
So you don't sleep. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, actually, I'm really big on my boundaries on things. And I think you'll relate to this, I know, because of the lifestyle that you have too. You're doing so many different things. But you really have to compartmentalize. You have to get comfortable leaning on and trusting people and delegating and doing things. And that was a tough thing for me. Once you go through what we've gone through, where you've had trauma and you feel like you can't trust people, when you can't do everything yourself, you start to get very afraid of what that means, but it's not scalable. If you really want to get bigger, you have to find that circle of people. You have to incentivize them. You have to define what it is that you can pass off. And I'm really big on defining those boundaries of what my time is and reminding my friends, because I have a very small group of core people, but I have a very massive group of people who want my time and want my friendship, and I care about them too, because I want to value anybody who feeds into what it is that I've been building, because I know we all need it. But I do set those boundaries.
Yeah.
So, with clients and things, I make myself available, but there are certain times where I'm just not on the grid, and no is a complete sentence. Say yes to yourself, say no to others. That is the self-care handbook. And it might seem hard to do sometimes, but you have to make time for yourself, because that's why you're supposed to put your mask on before helping others.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't. You're not a benefit to other people if you're not at your best. And I'm big on sleep. Every single night. I mean, I'm an early riser because I care about getting things done in the morning, but I'm good about the wind down period, whether that's reading before bed, taking a bath, winding down with my son. But I like to get to sleep. You have to pick what it is about yourself that you know that you need to feel recharged, and sleep is big for me. I silence my phone, except for emergencies for my son, but I'm big on shutting down, and my time with my son is precious. This is his only childhood. I tell myself all the time, because we can get lost in the hustle and bustle of trying to make something happen. And when I am having time with him, it is his time. And that's whether that's homework, whether that's a sport, whatever it is. And we have 4 of them. So this afternoon after I get done here, we shut down. We're all going to go. We're going to go watch the twins play football, and we'll all be there and be present. We also turn activities that need to happen into group activities. So right now as a family, we're reading Hatchet together, and that's our wind down period. We read a book together. We talk about it. We help everyone grow. We talk about the thematic things that are present in it. And while I'm reading, Darian's maybe bug spraying the whole house or vacuuming or whatever. We're big on sharing tasks and multitasking, and you need to have people that you can trust to help delegate things to, but you have to set boundaries. Overworking has been too glamorized. I used to glamorize it. It is not what is best for any of us. Work hard, work smart, but make sure you take care of yourself too.
I love that. So Hayden, if the listeners want to find you and have as much fun as I do following you, how can they find you? And also you do marketing. So if anyone's interested in that, how would you share that with us?
So my personal page, where I put all the gory details and all the fun stuff, that's at Hayden Merryn, and the E's in it are 3. So HAYD 3N 3RRYN. And then I have 2 different companies, at HVH Marketing and at 21 North. Those are both of my agencies, and you can kind of follow me on there. There's websites attached and all that fun stuff. I do all of the modern marketing style tactics. We're talking social media, influencer marketing, digital marketing, events, PR, branding, web development. We do all the fun stuff and are very good at it. We love it. So I've got a great team. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. It's been my baby, and it's the thing that helped bloom me out of all of this, darkness that I had. So it's something that I take a lot of pride in.
And you should. And I think that I personally would want someone with your gumption and strength in my corner in marketing. So, well, guys, you know where to find her. Hayden, thank you for being a part of Abuse Recovery Success. This has been so exciting. Long time coming in my viewpoint. I've enjoyed having you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us for another episode of Abuse Recovery Success. You can find me at April_the_hills on both Instagram and TikTok. You can find me on YouTube, where you'll see a lot of our fantastic videos and interviews like this one under April Hill, or check out our website at abuserecoverysuccess.com. Have a great day.